I've always contended that Age of Ultron is a really good movie, despite what my friends try to tell me. But I haven't seen it in years, so I decided to rewatch it and figure out what is defensible about this movie. Have I wasted all of my time and energy loving a movie that's not any good? Let's find out right now. I want to start off with the significance of the story. This is a pretty big movie within the MCU. First of all, the Infinity Stones finally get a name put behind them. We're also seeing a progression of the different characters for their entire character arc within the Infinity Saga. Captain America and Iron Man are finally starting to come around to being the heroes that we eventually see them in Endgame.
Isn't that the mission? Isn't that the why we fight? So we can end the fight, so we get to go home? Every time someone tries to win a war before it starts, innocent people die.
But that gets into another part about this movie, right? Which is that all Age of Ultron is just a build up to the next big thing. And in some ways that's true. We get build up to Captain America Civil War, Thor Ragnarok, among others. But that's not its only purpose. It's still telling the story and putting these characters in situations they have never been in. The fact that they got defeated and were beaten by Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and Ultron, something they never would have expected when they teamed up, puts them in an uncomfortable situation that they have to overcome, which is just good basic storytelling. So yes, it might lead into those other movies and expand the universe, but that's not its purpose. Its purpose is to grow these characters and create these situations that they actually have to overcome through other means than what we saw them do in the first movie. Tony Stark is very impulsive in trying to create Ultron, and the fact that he had that trauma from the first Avengers of almost dying, for him to push himself to be to create that suit of armor that can cover the world is something that's a pretty compelling motivation that makes sense for that character at the time. And then when Ultron is created, it makes sense for him to actually be quippy. That was a criticism that I saw levied against this movie. Ultron being quippy is perfectly okay.
I'm glad you asked that because I wanted to take this time to explain my evil plan.
If Ultron really is a mix of Jarvis, Tony Stark, Bruce Banner, and the Mind Stone, for him to be who he was makes a lot of sense. In the comics, he's very much a cold, calculating killer, but that's because he was built as a robot. Ultron's plan of dropping a city on itself may not seem like the most logical thing, but remember, this is a character who's also part Tony Stark, which means he's a big show-off. He likes to be boisterous and out there, and that's the kind of plan that an evil Tony Stark would create. To get into Pietro and Wanda, I love those characters and how they came about, because it makes sense during the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. that Hydra would have been able to have gotten the scepter. They would have found people to experiment on, and it makes sense that these characters would have a grudge against Tony Stark. But it doesn't necessarily make them evil because they just want to take down the Avengers. And yes, there is a big final third act CGI fight, but those are just fun, because even though some may criticize the villains as just being mechanisms for action scenes that are just fluffy, these action scenes are pretty awesome and engaging. I love the third act final battle. I really like what they did in Korea. I really love that the initial fights with Vision and with Ultron at first. Those are really freaking cool. This movie just had a lot going for it, and just because it has a lot going for it doesn't mean that the writing and the plot don't make sense. I think what I really started understanding while watching this movie is that fun is not the same as mindless, and entertaining is not the same as bad writing. They don't need to be against each other, nor do they always need to be synonymous with each other. The writing didn't always work for me, and some of the jokes didn't really land, such as this one with Bruce Banner and Natasha. Sorry. But just because some things don't work for me doesn't mean that this movie's not entertaining based on things like James Spader as Ultron. We still have these cool, fun moments. We still have a world that's expanding, and it's still a fun, entertaining movie that I can just sit back and eat popcorn to without needing to say this is a high-end, the most best writing, greatest thing I've ever seen. It's a fun movie. It's great. It might not have been as good as I remember seeing it, but I still like it, and it's still an enjoyable one. I've defended so many other comic book movies, so I would say check out my playlist right up here of all the comic book movies that I've defended, and I will see you in the next video.